Good evening, very late evening, and welcome back to Celtic World Order podcast. As always, I'm Steve O'Ma, and this is, as you'll imagine, it's a surprise to me, it's a surprise to you. It's a bit of a temporary setup, but needs must when these kind of things happen, because things have happened and happened indeed, because it is potentially something that some of us would have expected was on the cards at some way down the line. And that is, of course, well, you can see it there, by now. Brendan Rodgers has resigned. He's left Celtic for the second time by his own design. And I'll be honest with you, yourself, if you've been watching the channel, I have been critical of the manager and the coaching staff and the results that have come off the back of it. I kind of suggested that the next couple of games were going to be massive. I'd said, obviously, the game against Hearts. I foolishly overlooked the game on Wednesday against Falkirk, and I looked towards the game against Rangers in the cup, the sort of semi-final of the cup, and I said to me that, including the Sturm Graz, that they were basically two of those games, if you lost them, it was verging on a sackable offence. Of course, I'm talking about Hearts, which transpired to be a 3-1 loss, 8 points now behind in the league, and of course, we'll cross the bridge of Rangers when we get to it. Even though I was saying that, and I thought that the manager, if the results continued to go this way, I felt that there was maybe eroding faith in the group of players, maybe with the manager. Certainly, I know that there was large portions of the fan base that there was eroding faith and belief that he would be able to get it over the line. And I thought that it would have been an extremely hard decision that the unfashionable and rightly under pressure board would have had to make. I didn't necessarily expect Brendan Rodgers to be the one who tendered his resignation, but we'll get into those statements. And I don't know if this has maybe been a case of self-preservation. Maybe he has left before he was pushed, or maybe he basically got around the table and they had a discussion and he decided, yes, I will just make it look as if I'm leaving my own terms. Either way, let us know. I will try my absolute best. Please bear in mind with me, I'm on my own here. I can see the comments are flying a million times over at the moment. I'll try my best to try and get these in as much as I can. Let us know what your thoughts are on it. What do you think? Martin O'Neill, St. Martin, back from the cold storage. And of course, Sean Maloney. We all knew Sean Maloney was far overqualified for the job that he was in as Pathways manager. In fairness to him, I've heard some really positive stuff about what he's been apparently doing, but take it as you find it, because he is there and Martin O'Neill has not been in management for a long time, so it kind of probably makes sense to bring in someone like Sean Maloney as his number two, someone who, I know you'll say it, in the building, lazy, but this is an emergency break glass stuff. This is not exactly as if it's panned out perfectly, so I'd rather see Sean Maloney come in as the assistant manager or part of the coaching staff or whatever you want to call it than just go, that's John Kennedy that's in charge right now. I would prefer that. It might be a wee bit like an asked if you want stabbed or shot, but it is what it is, and we will get round to it. We'll go through those statements, but just to get that out of the way. So anyway, as I said, welcome back to the channel. We emergency pop-up here. If you are familiar with the channel, thank you very much. There's many of you in there. We love the fact that you're all supporting the channel, subscribing. Excellent. If you want to help the channel, by now, we donation membership section. Knock yourself out if you wish to do that. Totally optional. All the content's free. Links below for all the other stuff. So let's get down to business. Yes, as we say, it is going to be a case of getting into Wednesday with a surprise package, a temporary management team, and of course looking into a game against Rangers and a must-win semi-final against a Rangers side who now appear to, at least on the surface, have a wee bit of stability with a new manager, new ideas, and they get the new manager bounce. But maybe we'll get the new manager bounce, so that'll make that one at the weekend a wee bit more interesting. Try and get some thoughts up. There's plenty. There's well over 120. He's in here now. Of course, we'll get 420, the original member. The OG is in there. Mr. Nobody is in, and he says there's only one winner in this, and that's Peter Wall. We will get on to that. I have my thoughts about that. The AGM has not yet been announced. People were asking why that was. I think now when this news comes out, maybe that was something that was in the pipeline, and maybe that's why the AGM wasn't announced Total speculation, just throwing that out there. And I think that following this decision by the manager, well, ex-manager now, I think that there has to be changes at board level. It just cannot go that way. And I don't necessarily prescribe to this idea that the only winners here are the board. Before, again, I hate doing this because I feel compelled to say it all the time because people misconstrue stuff. But I'll say it just to caveat: the board are the biggest problem. They are the biggest issue at the club. They have gutted this club of talent. They have gutted this club of depth of squad. They tied one hand behind Brendan Rodgers' back. Facto, we sold so many top quality players, goals removed and didn't replace it. Yes, that is, shelve that. That is not going to change. And I don't think that this situation here takes any heat off the board. I don't think it diverts the attention from the board. I don't think it does them any favours. I said previously on the show after the Hearts game, where I said, I think that this actually is the last thing the board wanted. If the results were going well on the pitch, it would give them a level of protection, right? Because they could always just sit there and go, well, you're still winning. What are you complaining about, right? However, when it was going badly on the pitch, it was ramping up pressure on them. One, because it exposed their shortcomings and not providing the manager with the quality that we need to get the results done. But secondly, as is we're at this stage right now, the pressures were ramping up. The opinions were starting to change. There were always people who were just completely pro Brendan Rodgers and says, what did you expect? But there's people like myself, and I'm sure, and certainly for the comments, that appear to be there's a lot of people in the same boat as me, where you say, yes, right, he's got a poor squad. However, should it have been better than some of the teams that were failed to beat? Well, absolutely. Accentuate the positives, hide the negatives, try and find a way. We kept hearing it for the players. We kept hearing it for the manager or ex-manager, Brendan Rodgers, continually. I must find a way. But nothing really changed. So it looked as if it was all just words and no action. And unfortunately, no matter what the backdrop is that you've got, as a manager, you will always fall on your sword of results. That is the key point. And as I pushed as well, cast your mind back. I actually saw online, it was a projection, a comparison to where we were in the COVID season to where we are now. And we're kind of roughly on that same trajectory. The question I asked was, I understand the backdrop. I fully get it. But we need to also just remember that it's about winning by no matter what means. And sometimes you need to tear up your principles and just get on with it, find a way to win, as the manager said, but he didn't do that. So ultimately, between now or where we were in January, the board is still at fault, but there's nothing that could have been changed. Nobody could be brought in terms of personnel other than free agents to change it. We had to make do with what we had and find a way to do it. And my question was always, how far would be too far gone? How much risk would you take? Would you risk going down what happened with the COVID season, where the likes of Lennon dug his feet in and just went, no, I'm not going anywhere. The board didn't want to make that decision. And there was kind of echoes of that, when you look at it here. Brendan Rodgers continually, plied the party line off. I'm here for 3 years unless I get shelved. Apparently not. He's now moved on by his own accord. But as I said, I think that has been self-preservation. He's been told, I wouldn't be surprised, he's been told, if you lose against Rangers, you're out of job, mate. And that's been honest. Again, I feel sorry for him. But let's bring it full circle. Was the football that great? Now, I know we're going all the way back. But I had a look at it. In 2025 alone, 26 games played, 9 draws, 10 losses, scored 103, conceded 44. That's not that bad, although we're not scoring this season, and we know why. Biggest winning streak, 3 games, win percentage of 58, and in the league, out of 87 available points, we've taken 59. Now, no matter what way you dice that up between those 9 games that are here, but the rest of the 2025, forget this idea of we ran away with the league. It was done. Any manager, that's not really acceptable for Celtic. Let's be totally honest here. And let's have a wee look through 2025. A 3-0 loss to Rangers, 3 each with Dundee, 2-1 defeat off Hibs, 3-2 defeat off Rangers, 1-0 off St Johnstone, 1 each with Rangers, 1 each with St Mirren, lose the cup final, go out to Kairat Almaty, Nothing each way a very poor Rangers squad this season. Last minute victory, 2-1 against Kelly. Last minute victory, 3-2 against Motherwell. One each with Red Star, nothing each with Hibs. 2-0 with Dundee and a 3-1 loss to Hearts. I know the guy had one hand tied behind his back, but I ask you, forget about the backdrop. I know you say, well, that's part and parcel, that affects it, and it does. But is that acceptable? Particularly the ones from last season, when, yes, we lost Kyogo, but he still had a pretty damn good squad then. Still had a good squad, and a squad that were playing a lot better than they are now. I know that we lose players come the summer, but I'm just trying to look at it through result-driven eyes. So anyway, that's my first wee part there. I want to try and get up a couple of these people that are here. We've got the rubber ducks in the house. I love it. I always like that wee emoji. It always makes me feel a bit happy. A wee sort of happy smiley duck. That's what we need there. Michael Duffin is buzzing with the news and proud of Dermot Desmond for his statement. Now, that as a board supporter, that's quite a surprising one there, but we will talk through those statements there because there's a lot to unpack in there as well. Who else we get in the house? We get Cell88 here. Apparently it's my fault for slagging off the board and pretending the comments go faster than they actually do. I do not. Trust me, it's a tough gig talking to you, looking at my notes, trying to do this here, and that's pretty a tough gig to do. But who else we got in the house? Let's see what we've got there. Edward is saying the board plan to parade the big chest of cash at the end of the season. Well, we'll have Kenny and Shin up front. Well, that is true, and it's kind of funny because I don't know if you've got this. I get sent into one of my WhatsApp groups. It appeared to be like from a blog or a statement, and it said Celtic are going to do a 1-year extension with Brendan Rodgers. And I was like, what? Where the hell did that come from? Didn't see that coming. So I'm still waiting to find out where that actually came from. But that was like there, and then a quick 180, and here we are. He's actually left. That's the thing. Here's an interesting thing that Strangehoff says. Martin's a manager, not a coach. Maloney is a coach, and I 100% agree with it. What I will say is trying to look at the guys that we are going to have in place here. We have Martin O'Neill, vastly respected. The one thing that you will get out of Martin O'Neill, I think you will get respect, buy-in from the players. He commands respect, but it'll be a nice sort of contrast of styles because you'll have that old school approach where, it's all about respect and this is what I know what I'm doing, trust me, but you'll also have the sort of new wave side of things, which is Maloney. Now, whether you like Maloney, whether you think he's a farce or otherwise, he has a decent CV in that assistant role. If he was the guy that was in charge, absolutely, I'd be concerned, but Maloney will be the coaching guy, and I would be encouraged by that because I think he'll be a far more forward-thinking assistant manager stroke head coach, whatever he's going to segue into in this interim period. So I'm quite positive about that. Look at the sort of background that he's been from, particularly when you look at playing alongside Belgium. We all talk about this elite mindset, right? Brendan Rodgers, people didn't like it to get thrown out. He's an elite manager. That is really up for debate, I suppose, isn't it? I'm not going to sit here and rewrite history and shit all over him because I wouldn't do that. But I would say I think that we need to forget for one moment all the sort of behind the scenes stuff. That is undoubtedly, as I said, one of the major issues. But we need to bring it back to the basics. And even last season, when we won a double, we could have won a treble. Look at the January onward period where it kind of dulled off a bit. Were you genuinely happy with the football even there, then with a better squad than we have at this moment in time? I think if you dig down deep, your answer's probably no. So we can't start to rewrite history in both terms. We can't rewrite history and shut over the man who's been greatly successful, but we also can't rewrite history and say we were dead happy with it because we weren't. And I said a million times over on this, when we got to this period, we are now going to be entering the classic Brendan Rodgers third season malaise, where it sort of repeats itself. History repeats itself at most of these clubs and jobs that he's in. Good impact at the front end, and then it just starts to dip a wee bit. He's a money manager. And sometimes, as much as I'm not backing the board here, as much as I agree with that, we should be spending significantly more, certainly this summer than we did, and we should be far more ambitious. How much money should we be spending? Because that's the sort of mid ground that we've got to find. Because yeah, I fully agree, and I love this philosophy of, if you just want to maintain, I'm no your man. Absolutely, that's what I want to hear out from my manager. But I would be interested to know what level of spending he would want to do, because you can always argue the toss. Just to throw it out there, Adamida, Arne Engels, Trusty, Bernardo, you know, Brendan Rodgers signings, decent wee wedge of money. Have you been convinced by one or all of those guys? Maybe it's the way he's managed them, maybe it's the way he's set them up, but either way, that's a decent wee chunk of change there. So again, just for debate's sake, because that's what we've got to do here. So let's have a wee quick scan round there as well. Leanne Campbell's happy with the resignation, if it was there. Let's see who else we've got there. It was planned. You know, Don saying it was planned. They brought in Maloney and made up some role in his mind. Yeah, listen, I think that when we look at that, I think that it was suspect, because I always say he was highly, highly overqualified for the job that he was in. From his managerial time, regardless of the results, managerial experience, at a good level as a assistant coach or number two assistant manager, whatever term you want to put on it. Yeah, I think he was highly overqualified. Now, again, I can't speak with great level of authority on this. I've spoke to people who have a wee bit more. I'm not pretending to be in the know, but I've heard people speaking around in and around from the club of the whispers that you hear, and also spoke to other, sources, if you want to call them that, other podcasters, other people that have conversations have been done, and the general consensus appears to be that Maloney has been doing genuinely good things at trying to revamp the youth pathway system. The term I got was a return to the old, that kind of buy-in of similar to like Tommy Burns, where it was all about investment and going home visiting the families and sitting down and presenting to them what the pathway is for the player and so on and so forth, to try and get that buy-in. Whether that yields results or whether that's just birthday care pish, as they say, remains to be seen. But the idea of him trying to do something and trying to reinstate a sort of sense of actual purpose and belief in the system and not just playing at it, that is better than the alternative that we've had there. So again, it seems that he's been doing things in the right direction, or trying to do things in the right direction. Now that he's going to be removed in the interim, who knows what's going to happen with that? But that's not for you or I to worry about, and it's certainly not for him to worry about, because him and Martin O'Neill, it's about a win on Wednesday against Falkirk, it's a win against Rangers at the weekend, and it's about getting ourselves back into this title race. 29 games to go, far from over, but 8 points is a very precarious position, particularly on the form that we were on. I always says, let's not write off Hearts just because they're Hearts, because the question is, okay, will Hearts go on a run? Remains to be seen. But would you have bet on Celtic to go on a run and not drop points as well? That's the difference. It's up to them to try and fix that. We've got John James Kennedy is in the house. Always good to see you there on YouTube. Absolutely love it. And as Dan is saying, it's nuts, mate. I picked up my phone. I was sort of just putting the Wayne down to bed. I was sitting talking to the wife, and then phone's going mental. What the hell's going on here? I'm scrambling about trying to get up here to come out and talk this here. So let's see what other views we've got, and then we'll bring up these statements here. Yep. Andrew's saying deflection from the board, the failed Brendan, and obviously attempting to blame him for the shit show. It's a double-edged sword for me, Andrew. It really is, as I say. I don't know if you've been watching from the start. As I say, undoubtedly, and I just want to shelve this. I don't want to keep having to say it. The board are the biggest issue, right? The board have hindered the manager. They've even hindered Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney, because they're coming into a understrength squad, right? Now you're just hoping that they come in with alternative ideas. See exactly what we were all wanting from Brendan Rodgers, whether it's a formation change, whether it's moving the chess pieces around and playing guys in different positions and trying to maximise, as I said, accentuate, heighten the advantages and the positives that you do have from the squad. and hide the bad. Play to the strengths of what you've got until you maybe get through to January, and then you can supplement it and get the players in to do what you really want to do. That's up to them. So we might get some positives there, but undoubtedly they're coming in and they're facing a massive mountain, 8 points behind. And as I say, more importantly, they've got the game first and foremost. So a nice wee, I say a nice wee one. Is there any good game for Celtic at the moment? But certainly get into a game against Falkirk at home. It's a decent starting point to try and show, lay down a marker. And then, of course, the biggest acid test is going to be Rangers at the weekend. But if you want to talk about two guys that know what it's like to play in those games and winning those games, well, it doesn't get any better than Martin O'Neill, does it? And I'm really hoping that he's the kind of guy that will really inspire these players to go out there and get in about it. We'll see how that one goes. Let's see. I'll flick through some of these here. I agree. This is exactly what I say. It does. It raises the heat on the board. There's no more deflections. There's no more. It puts in the Stark, right to the front, the failings there. And as I said, it's a decision that even though it's been put out as being a resignation, I think that they've sat and had a wee sort of sit down, a wee brainstorm, and a wee powwow to talk about how do we sort this out. Because I think Rodgers has been told, you can't lose against Rangers, you can't drop any more points or you'll be at the door, mate. And again, that sounds ridiculous and it sounds a bit funny to suggest that these guys who have sabotaged our season so far would be in such a position to play the high and mighty and talk down to a manager who's brought us great success. But as I said, you've got to split the two, because any other manager, regardless of what they've got at their disposal, they need to find a way to win, and he hasn't done it. So how far's too far? Would we have done similar to COVID, let it run. You're 10 points behind, you're 11 points, maybe more, God forbid. How far do you let it go? 8 points right now seems like a mountain to climb, but it also seems very, very recoverable. I genuinely believe that despite I am never been so, up for it. I've never been so inspired to try and kick on. Despite all that chat, I genuinely believe Brendan Rodgers had just given up. And, what he says out in front of the camera versus what's going on in his demeanour backstage, so to speak, in the dressing room, out in the training ground when people aren't looking or he's not having to talk to people, that can filter through. I think a lot of the uncertainty as well of whether he was going to be around next season or otherwise was definitely a playing in factor. So I think it's an interesting one. But listen, keep bringing your comments. I've worked through there. I want to jump straight into these statements that we got from the club. Now, of course, the first one that we got was the generalised one about Brendan having left the club. Let me minimise myself a wee bit down here so that you guys can see a lot more of that screen. Here we go, and I'll do my best not to trip over the words. 9:44, you know what I mean? Wow, pick your time, Celtic. And this was one that wasn't going to be sliding out, was it? Normally they like to fire something out under the cloak of darkness and hope that you don't notice, but nobody was not going to notice this one. So it reads, Celtic Football Club can confirm football manager Brendan Rodgers has today tendered his resignation. It has been accepted by the club and Brendan will leave his role with immediate effect. The club appreciates Brendan's contribution to Celtic during his two very successful periods at the club. Brendan leaves Celtic with our thanks for the role he's played during a period of continued success for the club, and we wish him further success in the future. The process to appoint a new permanent manager is underway and the club will update supporters further on this as soon as possible. We are pleased that during the interim period, the former Celtic manager Martin O'Neill and former Celtic player Sean Maloney have agreed to take charge of the Celtic first team. Further details will be confirmed shortly. So there you go, short and sweet, as they say. Now, there's two things that I take away for that. There was the big debate of they won't sack him because of the money involved. Now, again, on that topic, I had turned around and says, we always talk about the amount of money we've got in the bank. We always talk about the amount of money we're paying corporate tax. So if you have a hard decision to make, whether it's buy a player, upgrade infrastructure at the stadium, or in this case, if you have to sack a manager, there, use the money, because you might as well, because you've not been using it for anything else, use it for something that needs to be done, right? So that's where we're at. If he's tendered his resignation, I think that, as I said, the writing's been on the wall. And there, of course, there'll have been some sort of mutual handshake agreement and he'll have probably been paid something. On this let us know in the comments. I want to try and bring them up. What do you think of this situation? You'll remember the last time he moved and he went to a different club and it was all the rats. He's left us. Are you happy with it? Do you think it would have been something that he's been forewarned about and he's essentially cut his losses early? Are you disappointed to see the back of him? What do you think? What are your thoughts on Brendan Rodgers at this time as a Celtic manager, second time run? How does this affect or hinder, if at all, his legacy, as you want to call it that? Where are you at on that kind of thing? Now, the interesting thing for me is the speed of appointment, immediately turning around and saying it's going to be Sean Maloney and it's going to be Martin O'Neill. Now, let's look at other clubs. Let's look at the club across the city. They bulleted their manager, Russell Martin, God rest his soul, managerially speaking, of course. And it was nobody. Nothing was planned. It was, I think, Stephen Smith, like under 19s coach, scrambling about, he's in charge. The fact that it's got Martin O'Neill there suggests to me that this is something that's been in the back burner, because you don't, I don't know, they've announced it at 9:45, right? But let's just say it was even 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whenever, I don't know, right? It's happened anyway today. You don't suddenly go, phone Martin, by the way, we need you, mate. I mean, maybe you do, right? Because it's Martin O'Neill. Maybe you do. Maybe I'm being a bit dramatic there, and it could happen that quickly. But I don't think so. I don't think you just you pull Martin O'Neill, bang, and he takes it in the drop of a hat. I mean, there's obviously the relationship with the pre-existing board and Dermot Desmond and things like that. That it's maybe the old do us a favour, we're in the shit, can you help us? Yep, no worries for you, I'll do anything. So there is an element that could be possible. But the fact that it's Martin O'Neill, who I'm sure his name's been popped up for various jobs, and whether that desire is there, that's a sort of itch that he wanted to scratch or not, is two different things. We've heard Martin O'Neill being quite vocal about Celtic. So one thing about him that I can say is even though he is on terms with the board and Dermot Desmond, he's not been a yes man. He's not sat there and done a Neil Lennon. He's not sat there and told the party line and defended the board to the hilt and the transfer policy and the results. He's been typically scathing Martin O'Neill about it. So that in itself is a positive, because Martin O'Neill has stuck to his principles as a man of integrity and honesty, and he's not uncompromised. So I like that. I like the fact that they've brought in Martin O'Neill, and it's not the feared. I know he's in a job at Dunfermline, but believe you me, see if they wanted to go and get him, Dunfermline would do nothing. He would take it. He'd resign and just walk into Celtic. But I'm glad that it's that. So as I said, that's where are you at in terms of that? Do you think that was something that was planned? I'm trying to run through some of these here. We've got I've got Quinny in the house. Good to see you, brother. Let us know your thoughts on this there, mate. And again, we've got, Big Daniel's going down the anti-elite manager stuff. Yeah, that's the thing here. And Strangelove, coming back to what I was asking, he has answered my question there, which was, were we happy? Take everything aside, take the backdrop aside. Were you happy with football? Middle of last season, but certainly for 2025 onwards, anything post Bayern Munich, were you happy with it? Even with the slightly, better squad than it was there. It's good to see some more coming in. We've got Paul McGuire is in on the YouTube. Lovely to see you there. And of course, this is the kind of things that we might see. Shin could do a job over Kenny. Well, do you know what? Big decisions to see. And I can guarantee you that Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney will be utilising every single person that they have at their disposal in the squad. They will not give a toss if it is a club signing or someone that was brought in with Martin O'Neill. At this moment in time, beggars cannot be choosers. There is options in there, and I am pretty sure that they will absolutely explore every single one that they possibly can. So it resigned, not re-signed. I didn't say re-signed, resigned. I said resigned. I said resigned there. But yes, let's bring up the second one, because there is another statement, and it is penned by the mustachioed man, the monopoly man himself. He has come up, and it is Dermot Desmond, which I find very peculiar. Dermot Desmond. We don't hear from anybody on the board. Why Dermot Desmond? Why not Michael Nicholson, the CEO? Why not Pedro Law, the chairman. Why Dermot Desmond? Because that for me is extremely, extremely strange. We always talk about Dermot Desmond having being a single shareholder that is a significant portion. He's not the owner, he's not the chairman, he's a significant shareholder. That's what he is. We've heard all the stories about how we have to run everything by him. Certain amounts get signed off, that he's basically penned the deals on his own. He's teed them up, sorted them out, made it happen, whatever way you want to, if that's good, bad, or indifferent, that's what's happening. But why is it Dermot Desmond is the one that comes out and speaks? Is that because he maybe feels that there's more pressure on Mackay, Nicholson and Law as the kind of ever-present, the guys that are there in the day-to-day, and that maybe they come out and make a statement that it makes issues worse for them? I just find it really, really peculiar. Robert Duck's asking, yes, there was. I did get sent that, and I mentioned that earlier on. I don't know if you were in at the time. Yeah, I get sent a peculiar statement. Oh, actually, let me see if I can read it to you, because it's, I mean, not that it matters now, but I just think it's absolutely hilarious. So where is it? I had it here. I've got my phone just scroll of death. Right, so this is what it said, right? I'll show you this here. It looks like it's an article, and it said, Glasgow, 27th August 2025. Celtic manager Brendan Rodgers is poised to sign a one-year contract extension after receiving assurances from the club board that significant funds will be made available in January's transfer window. Sources close to Celtic Park have confirmed negotiations between Rodgers and Chief Executive Michael Nicholson have progressed smoothly in recent days. Right, okay, with both parties eager to continue their partnership beyond of the current season. The new deal would keep Rodgers at the helm until 2027, reinforcing the club's long-term commitment to the Northern Irishman, who returned to Celtic in 2023 for his second spell in charge, right? And then there's another bit where you could scroll down, but that's what I get sent. And then, as I say, it's literally an hour after this happens. So let's get into the secondary statement, the Dermot Desmond statement, the one I just can't really get my head around, because, as I say, is peculiar choice, but it's Dermot Desmond. So what's he got to say? Because we don't hear much from him ever. We don't hear much from anybody at Celtic ever, but this is what Dermot Desmond's got to say. And as always, I'll bring myself all the way down here and try my best not to stumble over words. So again, literally, give or take 14, 15 minutes later for the original one, Brendan Rodgers today tendered his resignation as manager of Celtic Football Club. I want to acknowledge Brendan's contribution across his 2 spells as manager, during which he helped deliver success that forms part of the club's modern history. However, I must also express my deep disappointment at the way the past several months have unfolded. I'm sure you are, Dermot. I'm sure you're disappointed about the transfer window. I'm sure you're disappointed that there's a thing called the Fans Collective. I'm sure you're disappointed that the board are getting held to account by the fans and demanding answers. I'm sure you're disappointed that there's loads of banners and stuff with your big fizzog on it, with a big no sign over it, including all your pals. I'm sure you're disappointed that nobody wants to buy your tickets for the Europa League. And I'm sure you're disappointed with the results that you and your pals have put this squad into. Anyway, he then says, when we brought Brendan back to Celtic 2 years ago, it was done with complete trust and belief in his ability to lead the club into a new era of sustained success. Unfortunately, his conduct and communication in recent months have not reflected that trust. Now, this is a double-edged sword. This is completely a two-way street, because firstly, you're saying that you want him to lead us into a new era of sustained success. By new era of sustained success, do you just mean continuing the party of winning domestically? Do you mean just essentially the status quo? Because it's not a new era. The era that we're in right now is just success. Winning and winning regularly isn't new to Celtic. But a new era suggests complete change. A new era suggests a change from top to bottom and how we do it to, wait a minute, be world class in everything that we do. Now, I'm pretty sure for Brendan Rodgers to come back, there would have been, as he said before, an element of wanting to scratch an itch, to repair bridges and make, the best of a bad situation, because he has pretty much left on, slightly bad terms, and I sort of, the feeling has been that mutual among some of the fans. but I'm pretty sure that he also came back with levels of assurance. I'm sure that you, Dermot, told him that it was going to be all change. And certainly when he first came in, he told us how happy he was about the changes that were being made, but nothing happened. You, Dermot, and your pals have failed to go into a new era of Celtic, which would bring with it sustained success. But he then says that he's unhappy with his conduct communication. And again, we can talk about that, and we will do after I read this. In June, both Michael Nicholson and I expressed to Brendan they were keen to offer him a contract extension to reaffirm the club's full backing and long-term commitment to him. He said he would need to think about it and revert. Yet, in subsequent press conferences, Brendan implied that the club had made no commitment to offer him a contract. That was simply untrue. Now, maybe now, and I'll be total, transparency here, this is the first time I'm reading the statement, because when I got the statement from Rodgers leaving, I read that one, and then I heard this one here, and of course, I'm reading it fresh with you, so I'm going to react to it. This is genuine as it comes. I can say, hand on heart, I've not read this until right now. I find that bizarre, and I actually want to know your thoughts on that there. Now, what, as I was saying there, is he pinning the entire thing on Brendan? Well, it's hard to tell. Football's life, I know, and you're on board with everybody else that the board are at fault here, and you're saying he's full of shit right now. Maybe he is, but what I will say is, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that Brendan has been saying, I really don't know what to believe is the truth here. I really don't know what to believe. I'm not defending the board. Again, caveat, I'm not. But this is a bold tactic to come out and say this if it wasn't true. Or at least, as we often say, there's their word, and somewhere in the middle, there is the truth. Now, Brendan has continually rattled this on about how he is desired and wants to stay, and there's been no communication. I honestly refuse to believe that there hasn't been a level of communication on a contract situation with him. Because what was the one thing that we said at the start of the season here? Any uncertainty around the manager's position could be disruptive to the players and the success of this season. We said we needed that ironed out and we needed that to be made clear. So despite the board, and it sounds like I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, believe me, I'm not. I just think it would be mental, absolutely bizarre to not at least have crossed this bridge or approached it at some point. So I really, really don't know. But anyway, he's saying completely untrue. And if this is they're not happy with his conduct, this is maybe something that is coming to the fore here. His later public statements about transfers and club operations came entirely out of the blue. At no point prior to those remarks had he raised any such concerns with me, Michael, or any member of the board or executive team. In reality, he was given the final say over all football matters and was consistently backed in the recruitment process, including record investment in players he personally identified and approved. Now, this is twofold again for me. Looking at it, I refuse to believe again that a manager hasn't went to them. So this comes back to what I'm saying, your opinion, their opinion, and the truth in between. And I think this applies to what we just spoke about previously and this. I refuse to believe that the manager hasn't went to them and says, look, we need it better, we need it quicker, we need it faster. Particularly when that narrative from the manager started at such an early juncture, all the way at the start of the pre-season, calling for new players, calling for quicker recruitment. So it's irrelevant. You can talk about in the last couple of weeks, well, if you were unhappy with him speaking out and demanding these things, you're claiming he didn't. He was doing it in the public forum. Well, that's right or wrong is neither here nor there. Maybe he was doing it in the public forum because he did come to you and you didn't do anything about it. So again, somewhere in the middle is there's truth here. So I don't think you can criticise about recent weeks because he started saying it during pre-season. You could have acted then, you could have helped him, and you could have made it better. Talking about record investment in players, again, this is another stick that will get beat round the head with. And I mentioned at the top of the show, 11 millions in Engels, 9 on Ida, 6 on Trusty, and then you start adding in some of the other players. So there has been a decent amount of money spent, but again, has it been enough? Well, no, it hasn't compared to what's come in. Have we replaced players? No, we haven't. And again, probably the record amounts that we have spent probably wouldn't have had to have been the case had the board, had the recruitment team done a better job. If they hadn't left at lastminute.com scrambling about where a team went, oh, well, we wanted 6 million for him, but now that you're absolutely desperate, it'll be 9 million, please, and so on with Engels. So there's a bit of blame on both parties there. But again, like I refuse to believe that Rodgers wasn't spoken to about a new contract, I refuse to believe that the board weren't spoken to about the state and slow pace and lack of urgency when it comes to improving the team. Nonsense. That's a smokescreen. When his comments were made publicly, I sought to address him directly. Brendan and I met over 3 hours at his home in Scotland to discuss the issue. Despite ample opportunity, he was unable to identify a single instance where the club had obstructed or failed to support him. The facts did not match his public narrative, right? Not much I can really say about that than I haven't already there. I think that if you have a 3-hour conversation, it's maybe one of those ones where they say, right, well, what do you want? And it's kind of like when I do these podcasts and I'll say, manager needs to do this, this, that, and that, and then you go, well, what would you do? And sometimes you get an answer and sometimes you don't. Maybe that's what's happened there. Regrettably, his words and actions since then have been divisive, misleading, and self-serving. They have contributed to a toxic atmosphere around the club and fueled hostility towards members of the executive team and the board. No, wait a minute. What has happened there? Yes, the manager has spoken out, and rightfully so, because he's been absolutely sold a dafty by yous. The squad has been laid threadbare, assets stripped within reason, and he's not been replaced. Of course, he's going to be angry about it. Has it been misleading and self-service? Well, again, that's a case of, your point, their point, and the truth in the middle. Has it created a toxic atmosphere? Well, yeah, I'm sure it was. And again, this comes back to why I said about him leaving. I think that maybe it's also into the team. They'll say it wouldn't. I think it would have. I genuinely believe it would have. And it was probably affecting performance on the pitch and buy-in and general sort of camaraderie and positivity around the club. I do believe that. Has it created fueled hostility towards the board? Well, absolutely it has, but it's not been solely based on the words of Brendan Rodgers. It has been the inactivity of this board to do their job, do it properly, and really push forward in a direction that the manager wants, match ambition of us as fans, players, and coaching staff and manager to try and move on and make the best version of ourselves. So it's very much also self-inflicted. Is Brendan Rodgers maybe twisting the knife and making it worse for you? Yes, he is. But at the same time, do you blame him? Every member of the board and executive team is deeply passionate about Celtic and acts at all times with professionalism, integrity, and a shared desire for success. Oh, wow. It's a bold strategy, Carden. Let's see how that one pans out. Dodgeball, class, go and watch it. But no, jokes aside, deeply passionate and a shared desire for success. Wow. Integrity, not so sure about that. The leak to the press and then denying anything happened and their investigation being limited to, well, we asked everybody and they tell us no, so what else can we do? That's not really professionalism or integrity and the desire for success is self-explanatory. What has failed recently was not due to a structure or model, wasn't it? Wow, again, this is genuinely the first time I'm reading this. It's incredible that they think that what they're doing here isn't broke. And that's echoed from, remember, the feedback for the fan collective. They don't think what we are doing is wrong. They don't think that our transfer policy, that every way that we operate in various facets of the club is wrong. And that is wild. But to one individual's desire for self-preservation at the expense of others. Celtic structure, where the manager oversees football, the chief executive manages operations, and the board provides oversight, has served the club to great success for more than 2 decades. We all share the same ambition, ensure Celtic continues success domestically and achieve further progress in Europe. Every pound generated by the club is reinvested, oh my God, holy moly, towards those goals and continuous improvement of Celtic Football Club. That is just, I knew what I was getting here. I could expect roughly what I was getting. As I say, I think there's some bits in here that, like I say, is that, aye, there's a truth that maybe Brendan isn't telling, but some of this is just wild. This is literally saying, look at the shiny, look at the trophies, look at the success, look at the medals, count them up. What you greeting about? I can't believe. Well, no, I can believe that they've went down this route, but it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, come on, read the room. Celtic is greater than any one person. You might want to take that on board, Dermot, because you have had a stranglehold on operations at Celtic. You and Peter Wall have had an absolute stranglehold over the progression of Celtic beyond just the status quo of being, Rangers +1, just be better than Rangers, and we'll see how it pans out in Europe. So, an absolute cheek to turn around and say that they come out with that kind of stuff. Our focus is now on restoring harmony, strengthening the squad, and continuing to build a club worthy of its values, traditions, and supporters. Wow, let us know what you think of that. As I say, that's the first time I've reading it, but I think, what does restoring harmony and strengthening the squad mean? Does restoring harmony mean, after the Martin O'Neill and the Sean Maloney period, does that mean getting in a complete and utter yes man that's just going to be a rug for you to do what you want? I can see, by the way, that there's been loads and loads of comments coming in. Obviously, when I was reading that, I can only read because I'm on a different screen. I will try and revisit some of those things there. Alan, brilliant question here. What kind of atmosphere are we going to have on Wednesday night? Toxic atmosphere? Wow, I honestly cannot believe. And yet Henrik McLarsson is saying on YouTube, cannot wait to see how the fans react here. What I would say I want a positive reaction, right? We are in a real state of limbo at the moment. We are in a real fragile position. Rightly so. There should be protests. There should be voicing of opinion. But, and it is a but, and I'm asking, and I would appeal for this one time, do it before the game, outside if it needs be. Do it at half-time, unfurl a banner, right? But let's get behind this team. Let's get behind Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney in this first game at Celtic Park. I expect, despite it being a crap Wednesday night, freezing for masses, I'm expecting a full house, and it should be. The key point here right now is, I'm sure the collective and the fans and everybody else will strategise how they want to approach this. But right now, at this moment in time, this club, this team need all the backing they can get. Please, 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 I hope and pray that we do not allow, as bad as the situation is, this is verging on crisis stuff right now, by the way. As bad as the situation is, 8 points behind, manager resigning, conflicting statements, Brendan Rodgers saying one thing, Dermot Desmond coming out with all that stuff there, and it going like that, button heads. We need to focus eyes on the prize. This team are really absolutely bereft of any inspiration right now, and they need the full backing of the fans right now. I do not want this to be a complete and utter sideshow. We need to try and back this team the best that we can. Ali's asking, is Kennedy gone? I do not know. And yet, as it says there, Kennedy has left. Well, if that is true, I'm waiting on the update, and I will be totally honest here. If Kennedy's left, I think that's a good thing. I genuinely think that's a good thing. A good servant. Yep, Kennedy's gone. It's coming in. Wow, that's news to me. Thank you for letting us know. But I did say that. See, when I was talking about Brendan Rodgers maybe having to move on at some stage, or maybe even being sacked, I said the important thing is it needs to be root and branch. You can't keep forcing Kennedy, Strachan, Woodsy, everybody else onto whatever manager you got. You just can't do it. See if what he's saying, the statement about wanting to find a new appointment and move forward and progress and whatever. You need fresh ideas. We need fresh ideas upstairs. And as I said, I expect that there should be, I hope and pray, but the collective ain't going away. That will continue to pressure. We need change upstairs as well. But we also need fresh ideas on the ground. You can't just keep going to the well of Kennedy and Stratton and Woodsy and everybody else. They guys have been there for so long. It's time for them to move on. Again, ambition. Do these guys not have ambitions of their own? Does Kennedy not want to step up and be an actual manager in his own right? Is he always want to be the bridesmaid and never the bride? These guys need to move on. Celtic need fresh, vibrant, new ideas. And all right, Rodgers is away, and we get Martin O'Neill, who, no disrespect to him, brilliant manager, phenomenal. But, he's an old hat. He is. He's an old school manager. And it will remain to be seen how relevant he is in modern football. I think the one thing you will get out of him, though, and that is worth its weight in gold, is being able to inspire players, being able to stand there with literally, history and success behind him as a player, as a manager in his own right. Elite teams that he's, managed, and he'll be able to sit there and go, well, I know what I'm doing. But then he's got that younger, new school guy beside him, Sean Maloney again. Sean Maloney might just be brilliant at being a coach and an assistant. Maybe that is his level, right? But it's a nice blend, and it's fresh ideas. You've got Martin O'Neill, who's got the background, the experience, but then you've got Maloney, who's been working in modern football circles at a top level with new ways of thinking. And that could be a good blend in the interim, but it'll be interesting to see where we go from there, because it's important that the next appointment is something that is of worth. It can't be bring back Ange. I know there's people calling for it can't be bring back Ange. Certainly can't be bring back Neil Lennon, and it can't be make Sean Maloney step up. It needs to be something completely different. I'm not saying I've slated the guy and says I don't know what the fascination is, but it needs to be like a Knutson or a Marco Rose or somebody. It needs to be somebody coming in completely fresh with their own staff and trying to kick us on. So there we go. That's where I'm at with that. But yes, let's bring it back. And here's another one. Brown Warrior says it. And do you know what? This was the one that was on. I was actually talking to one of my mates about this the other day. And I says, yep, I wouldn't be adverse to Martinez coming in. Again, he's worked well alongside Maloney before. They know each other. I think he plays quite an attractive brand of football. You can say what you will about his level of success, but he's certainly been in good, high-profile jobs, and you don't get that if you're a dafty. Now, of course, the only kicker here is that his contract's up at the end of the summer's football, and depending on the sliding scale of where Portugal go, he could be offered many jobs. So maybe from a Celtic perspective, you want Portugal, if that's your guy, to be absolutely garbage, right? Maybe that's what you want. That's maybe what you want. And you get him in. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Square Sausage is saying, yep, Knutson is free in December, but I think that the sticky one here is I says it's twofold. We talk about players that want, or managers that want ambition. And I think that maybe Knutson's a guy who lacks ambition. Now, what do I mean by that? If you read all upon him and you believe everything that you read, it's hard to tell the sort of, provenance of these things. But he essentially has, if all is true, one of the best contracts in football, where he's at a team, he's got autonomy, he's allowed to do what he wants, they let him get on with it. And he's getting regular success. He's playing for a team where, let's be honest, the level of expectation at Bodo Glimt is nowhere near what it's going to be at Celtic. Now, I'm not saying that their fans will happily take defeat, but if he didn't win the league every single season, he's probably not going to be getting, put into the shop one day and wanting to be in fire and billeted. So there's that there. But also, if you believe this, they say, again, it's rumour and innuendo, that he is allowed to identify players and gets a wee bit of a sweetener on any selling. So if that is true, and you're in a job where you've got autonomy, you're allowed to do what you want, you've got a steady wage, you're not under a great deal of pressure, and you get a wee sweetener every time you spin around a player and make a profit, why would you leave that to come to Celtic? So that's just where I'm at with there. In terms of, let's have a look, right? We all know who Martin O'Neill is, right? But let's have a wee look, right? Because how relevant, and I hate saying that about a legend like Martin O'Neill, but how relevant at this moment in time is Martin O'Neill? So let's have a wee look at St. Martin's managerial stats. I've managed to pull up here. So as you can see, Republic of Ireland there, 40% win rate. No, it was 2013. That's a long time since he's been cutting about there. It's funnily doesn't have the forest on here, which I found quite weird. I know it was a bit of a coffee stop there. Sunderland, again, you take Sunderland as you find it, 31%. It's Sunderland. Villa, of course. Again, Villa aren't the Villa of now, so a 42% win rate at Villa is actually pretty good, to be honest with you. And then, of course, we all know what he's done at Celtic. Look at that, 75.5 with. Whoa, that's beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely phenomenal stuff. And then everything else takes itself under it. If you look at Leicester again, say 38%, Leicester back in the day, that's pretty good as well. And he was a hot property when we got him there. It's not bad. It isn't actually that bad. He's not been in football for a good period of time, and obviously he was at Ireland, but it's not bad. As I say, he's got the experience, but he's been out of football for a long time. But he's also been around football constantly. He's always on panels. He's always, doing commentary or doing analysis or whatever. So he's certainly kept his hand in terms of he'll know what's happening. He'll know a bit about the modern football and what's going on. But the big one, the one that's hopefully going to be the major asset to him, is going to be the guy who has been closer to the football in action, and that is, of course, Sean Maloney. So let's bring up him now. This doesn't include his time, of course, as assistant managers. This is just exclusively what Sean Maloney was doing as a manager. Now, you can even see this has been updated, and I've got Celtic on there as part of the coaching, so there we go. But yeah, look, Wigan, couple of seasons, 40%. That's not disastrous, really, is it? Let's be totally honest here. Not disastrous. 31%, 33, 37 at Hibs. That was probably pretty poor. But again, are Hibs really that good? Remains to be seen, of course. And then you've got the Celtic unders, 67%. It's better than they're doing at the moment, that's for sure anyway. But yeah, those are just wee quick stats to show the two guys that are coming in. It is what it is. Does it really, really matter? But I think that the important thing is Glasgow Harley, they're saying, what a day, man. He is obviously happy. And yeah, I totally agree. And I said this, Sligo boy, I think that Maloney wouldn't be accepted. He wouldn't be accepted as a outright manager. So it's interesting that they had to bring in Martin O'Neill. They had to bring in a figurehead and then supplement it with somebody like Kennedy, who thankfully has now left. I know that sounds horrible, but it had to be changed. You couldn't just have him lingering about in the building. It can't happen. Just can't happen, because it means that we'll get a fresh cut. It means that whoever's going to take over for these two, whether it involves Maloney or not, it's going to be a new look system. And that in itself is a positive if we want to try different things and move on there. So, that is the point there. And if football's like saying Maloney's another Lennon, I don't necessarily believe that. I don't. People say jobs for the boys and stuff. I actually think that when you look, unlike, and again, no disrespect, Lennon done well in his own respect as a manager. He did fairly decent. But the difference is, despite his managerial side of things, when you look at Maloney, he has went out and he's tried to do his own thing. And he's been an assistant role at big level, at a big international level. And that in itself is commendable. That is trying to push on, and that is trying to improve, and that is trying to be quote unquote elite. And maybe he is just a guy that's going to be far better, superior as a number two. And I'd be happy with that. I don't buy into him as being a manager in his own right. Absolutely not. But I am happy to have him in and around the coaching staff, because if he can bring any level of what he's learned in his time in international setups, and maybe even some of his managerial, you learn from your mistakes as well as your successes. If he can bring some of that in there, then, well, it could hopefully be good. Because the problem is things stagnate at Celtic. We're stagnating upstairs in the board, but we've been stagnating in the dugout for ages, for years. I'm not just talking about Brendan here. I'm talking about, Strachan, Woodsy, Kennedy, stagnating. The same guys just getting passed on, and managers having to come in and just eat it and get on with it. because it's always a case of this is how we do things at Celtic. That's just the way we do it. You know, do you honestly think if Ange Postecoglou had came in with his own coaching staff, we might have got a different version of Ange Postecoglou football? Who knows? Do you think that if Neil Lennon didn't have Kennedy cutting about, we would have maybe seen a different form? I don't know, maybe. So there's variables to it. There is variables to it. I think that, we can't, again, and we look at it, Eddie Howe, there was a chat that he wanted all his own guys, but wasn't getting it, and that was partly, people criticise that, but at the same time, you want your own guys. Why should I take Strachan? Why should I take Woodsy? Why should I take Kennedy? That's what we need, and we're getting a clean break now, so take that as a positive as you find it. But yeah, before we finish up, listen, well over 400, absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much about showing it. Here's one that I want to bring up. Getting Smoke saying Bellamy. Now, myself and Paddy were at a night with John Hartson on Friday past there, and this came up in conversation, and there was a lot of chat around about, well, if Rodgers goes, who'd be the manager? And Craig Bellamy was getting plaudits left, right and centre. Now, I personally think it's too early for a guy like Bellamy. I really, really do. I think he's doing a pretty good job with what he's got at Wales, but I think it's I think he's kind of like a Lampard or a Gerrard type signing. He's a name value. He's a kind of, oh, look at us. It's like Roy Keane, do you know what I mean? And I'm no for that. I think Celtic need to go after a manager of substance and experience and quality. Up and comers, as you call them, they are what they are, but no for me. No for me. I wouldn't be going with that there. And yeah, there's no way Roy Keane should be getting the job. Absolutely no way. Simon Donnelly, Henrik, I hope that's just complete jokery there. And same with Wilson as well at Partick Thistle. I know the jokes will roll out of these that they can be any old ex-player that's done a job. And again, Rory's saying there, Bodo got a manager. We've briefly spoke about it. Absolutely not. Robert Duck, Lampard, no, thank you. Absolutely not. And there's a funny one there as well, right? People are saying, wouldn't it be funny if Kevin Muscat rocks up to Celtic? It's no happening. It's no happening. It's just no happening. Too staunch, I think it is, isn't it? I think that's what you call it. I mean, see, at the end of the day, I wouldn't care if Celtic's new manager had played for Rangers or not. I wouldn't care. I would not care. See if they've got a decent CV and they play attractive football and they're going to get the job done. I really, really don't care. But no, I don't see somebody like Kevin Muscat coming to Celtic, particularly after him being on the verge of going to Rangers and of course having played for them. I think when it comes to managerial, it's more cutthroat. That doesn't really matter to players. But no, I don't think he would do it for multiple reasons. One, basically being that close to being at the Rangers job. Two, playing for them. Three, knowing exactly what would come off it from an off the field, the visceral sort of garbage that goes with the backdrop. Unfortunately, the Glasgow Goldfish Bowl, it would be hard enough coming into that job without you being a guy that turned down Rangers and then went to the rivals. Absolutely no chance there. Elvis is right there. Well, I mean, he got us all over us, but no, absolutely no chance, man. I keep saying Gerrard as well. There's no chance that would happen. And again, I know we're saying it for bants. Nobody's genuinely thinking it, but no, I wouldn't get near that with a barge pole. I mean, the reality question is there, who is there? Who's out there? Just before we finish up, who's actually out there that you would think, do you know what? We would get them. We would have them in, because this is where the balance that comes in. Dermot Desmond's statement, all that nonsense about wanting to kick on, where is it? Here it is again. Every pound generated in the club and reinvested, apparently. In the same ambition ensure Celtic's continued success domestically and achieve further progress. Apparently that's what they want to do. If you go and get a manager of quality, of substance, that comes with a thing called assurances. You don't go and get a top level manager, whether they're out of job or they're in a job and you're pricing away. You don't get the manager that's off a certain standard if they're going to be told, well, we'll bring you in and we need to sign some players in January. I mean, we can't really tell you how much that is, but we'll maybe buy you some players. You can't do that. And this is where everything needs to change now. It's horrible that it's came at such a terrible time. People are using the term crisis. People are using the term crisis. What do you think? Is this a crisis? But we sit here, we're 8 points behind in the league. Yes, 29 games to go. The big question I'd say whilst Rodgers was in this shoe is do I think Hearts can win the league? Well, stranger things have happened. A point to Leicester, for example. Nobody thought it possible. Now, as I said over, if Celtic were 8 points ahead, you go, pack it up, give the trophy, league's over, game's a bogey. So why should it be any different when it's Hearts? Now, I know people say, but they don't have the squad, they'll fall away, they'll crumble, it's only 9 games, and I totally get that. There's another 3 games against us to play. There's another 3 games against Rangers. Who knows? They could go. They've got 3 games against Hibs. There's lots of games that they could drop points in. But the big question was, would Celtic go on a sustained run? Bearing in mind that our hottest run streak has been 3 games in 2025. Would we have went on that run? Would we have went on a run and not lost points? Forgetting about what they're doing, would we have done that? And I believe that we wouldn't. That's the reality there. So it's not inconceivable to think that Hearts couldn't. We know what they're doing with this analytics thing. And no matter where you think this is mumbo jumbo, modern nonsense or not, when you listen to it, this is the kind of forward thinking I want to see from Celtic. Now, I'm actually going to be doing a special show. I'm going to record a show and I'll be looking at Celtic's transfer activity from 2008 up to present day and asking the question, just how good is it? So keep your eyes out for that. That will be coming in due course. And I think it's very important as we look towards January and we look towards the likes of what Hearts are doing. Now, just to touch on Hearts for 1 second whilst I'm talking transfers, people scoffed at it and says, oh, analytics, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I've seen you champ managers get that and all this kind of stuff, right? They have turned around and says the way their analytics system works is Hearts will not look at a player. They will not consider a player unless they have played a minimum of 3,000 minutes as a senior professional. Now, what does 3,000 minutes equate to? Well, it's about 33 games, 33 professional games, right? That might not sound like a lot, but it's essentially almost a full season, right? That's their baseline. Not 33 appearances, not 33 appearances like 10 minutes here off the bench. 33 full 90 minutes, that's what they're looking at. That's what they're wanting it to come to. Now, obviously, I know that 3,000 minutes could be spread out, 15 minutes here, 45 here, 90 there, but that will take you longer to get there. So that could be 2 seasons worth of data or whatever. 3,000 minutes. Celtic are looking at guys, or had been looking at guys, or signing guys who had like 20 appearances and about 300 minutes and spending money on them. These are 2 different things. Nothing's a sure thing in football, but you need to have a base level, a body of work to turn around and say, that's going to work. Now, I've joked and says, who the hell was, scouting guys like Kwon? Who looked at Kwon and went, that's a brilliant idea? Even no disrespect to him because he looked decent in pre-season. Who looked at Anamura and went, that's exactly what we want? Because the sample size is that. Now, he's cheap enough that it might turn out to be a rip-roaring success further down the line. But I would rather do the Hearts model and go and get guys with 3,000 minutes, 33. They've played the equivalent of 33 full games for a senior team. And Hearts are using that to great advantage. Look at the guy, was it Kaziris that tore us apart? I think he cost him nothing. Nothing. Now, he'd walk into the Celtic team right now. I'm not saying that Hearts are the gold standard, by the way, and that their signings are amazing. They're all going to be brilliant. But at this moment in time, Braga and Kadiris would walk into the Celtic team. Walk into it easily. And the cost is near as that. Do you believe that the 2 players I've just mentioned are worse than the four. Again, I'm not saying he's a bad player, I'm just using it. The nearly 5 million that we paid for Tanecki. Because I don't think so. And I bet you if you look at their actual data, goals and assists, it will be higher than what Tanecki put out that we paid £5 million for. So it makes you think. Now, there's no such thing, as I say, as a sure thing in football. But you give yourself the fighting chance to get the right results. And see if Celtic want to go down this speculative cheap punt route, do it based on proper research, not the likes of recommendations. Now, here's another one, for example. Tosh McKinlay is one of Celtic's scouts, right? Love Tosh McKinlay as a player. But Tosh McKinlay is also an agent, or has also been an agent, right? So again, I ask you the question. He's scouting. You need a centre half. You need a number 6. And you go and there's a guy out there and he's going to cost you £6 million. And you get no cut. You just identify him, he's class. Or you've got a guy in your books that's going to cost £4 million. But you get a cut of that. What one of those players do you honestly think you are going to recommend that Celtic sign? And this is where Celtic are broken. There is jobs for the boys, and people will come back. I'm circling back round. For me, Sean Maloney isn't a job for the boys, because Sean Maloney, again, from what I've heard, is doing positive steps to advance Celtic and move us forward. Sean Maloney's over qualified for his job, and he's coming in with fresh, modern ideas. And I think that's what we'll get for a coaching standpoint. Celtic are broke everywhere else. Agents who are scouts, Tosh McKinlay. When you blur those lines, that's when you end up getting your pants pulled down. It's the old Rolodex, or it's the old, what was it, Doddy Doohan that we used to always go, you got a player for us, mate? Aye. The guy could be absolutely tripe, but he's going, I've got this player. You need a centre half. Aye, I've got just the guy for you, because he's getting a cut out of it. There's no level of, what's the word I'm looking for, integrity. It's self-serving. Brendan Rodgers has been accused of being self-serving there. And I want to just finish up on that before we go. We're still nearly 400 strong. Let us know. San Fran saying, well, Martin and he'll be wearing a suit. Well, it's a funny one, isn't it? Martin was always a tracksuit manager. I want him to bring back the jumper with the polo top under it, right? And the trackies with the white socks popped and a pair of coppers on. That's what I want. Maybe now as he's getting a wee bit older in his age, maybe we'll get him one of those Celtic branded sort of what they call space hoppers, right? So we can do the jumping if we score. But no, I don't care what he wears. I want us to just get on with it. But yes, talking about bringing it full circle, Brendan Rodgers has come out, tendered his resignation. The key points for the Dermot Desmond one, apparently being the word here, we'll soon find out in due course. I wonder, this is the most important thing, I wonder if Brendan Rodgers will speak. Will there have been, it doesn't, for me, look on the surface of the Dermot Desmond statement that there'll have been any wee contract or clause or anything signed. And I think if Brendan Rodgers wants to really peel back the curtain and, for lack of a better term, expose the wrongdoings that we are all shouting as fans, what's actually supposedly happening behind the scenes, then yes, come out and speak up to it. I think there'll be a real mixed reaction here. I think it'll be 3 reactions. I think there'll be the people who think just the board's fault, they've sold them out, and they'll have ignored that the football's been terrible since January. Yes, again, I say it, hand tied behind his back, but it's up to a manager and the staff and the players to get the job done. They're not doing it, and no matter what the backdrop is, that's what you'll be judged on. It's up to you to do it. You either do it or you don't, and you cannot be just allowed to continually walk through one bad result and another. So there's that side where people just simply say, played into the board's hand or whatever. There'll be people who will go full-blown, he's the rat, he's left us. And then there'll be people who thought, do you know what? I think he should have been sacked, and this is maybe the best thing that's happened. So I think there'll be 3 reactions. Do you think there'll be another alternative option for that I've not thought of? Let me know. And and this is the thing. Brendan does need to take a level of accountability, and it is a level of accountability for the results. Coming back to what it says about this whole idea of self-servicing by Rodgers, a lot of things that he has been saying, there's been a mixture of home truths, right? But there's also been a lot of peculiar quips, and maybe now it's hard to tell. I don't want to go hard and say lies, but I have never been more motivated to turn this around. I've never been more motivated, right? Loads of words, not a lot of action. It's up to me to get the best out of this squad. No, get the best out of the squad. I am here until I'm emptied. Doesn't say that. And then also as well, he comes out and he says peculiar stuff. The Honda Civic thing. He made it out as if, oh, I'm talking about the speed of play. No, you're talking about the players, mate. And he tried to backtrack on it and he failed miserably, in my opinion, at doing it. And then he comes out and, we get a result and he goes, oh, we're a Range Rover Sport. And, come on. He'd been planning that. See stuff like that. That annoys me, and it did annoy me. He couldn't wait for that to happen. Well, the Range Rover Sport crashed into a wall on Sunday. Shut up and get on with the business here. And then he says other stuff. We signed Taneke, and he tells us he's an exciting player that can play on the left or he can play on the right. He's flexible and can go on both sides. Okay, that's what he says when he signs him. He says on Sunday he's left-footed and can't play on the right. There's contradictions all over the place. And that's the one thing, as times went on, I'm genuinely not, this isn't a witch hunt against Brendan Rodgers. I'll always be honest with you. You know where I've been on it. I don't ever really know what to believe that comes out of Brendan Rodgers' mouth. And it comes back to this, the truth, one person's view, the truth's in the middle. It's the same with Brendan Rodgers. I genuinely don't know what to believe. How invested really was he? Was it just words in the hope that it, took pressure off him? Was it hope that fans would go, all right, it's cool, it's going to work out? Was it hope that he speaks positively and the players buy in, the manager's here? I really don't know. I'm always confused. He's really an enigma. Really, 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 Brendan Rodgers is an enigma. And San Fran says Brendan was trying to get fired. He did us a favour, or did us a favour by walking away. I've seen a lot of people saying that, and that was another thing where people were turning around and saying he's working his ticket, he's trying to get sacked. Now, I don't believe that. I don't think any professional player, manager, coach, whatever, tries to self-sabotage. And if the thought of that was even a possibility, then it is completely vile and disgusting. I don't think, Brendan Rodgers might be a lot of things, but I don't think that he would be a guy that would do that, because ultimately what's happened here is his reputation is also fried a wee bit. Now, just to finally touch on one thing that I also found very peculiar, did you see the interview? I think it was BBC. It was one of these sort of like, just, I'm Brendan Rodgers and I'm talking to you about football. See, as soon as he did that interview, I started to think he doesn't want to be here. That was putting himself in the shop window. That was brand Brendan. That was self-preservation. Doing that interview, that was very much putting out the feelers. Again, getting yourself out there beyond the wee bubble of Scottish football, because nobody really cares about it. But do an interview with the BBC and I'll sit down and I'll talk all football and I'll sit there and be all sweet. I think that was what was going on there. And there's big decisions to be made here between now and then. But yes, I will pretty much leave you at that. We've almost went an hour and 20 minutes. And yeah, there was a lot to unpack. I appreciate every single one of you coming on here and, giving your thoughts there. Just finally, I want to try and bring up quick fire. I just want yes or no. Are you happy that Brendan Rodgers is no longer at Celtic? Get them up and we'll try and bring these up here. Paddy for manager. Can you imagine? 4-0. Go there and win 4-0, boys. That would be it there. And yes, you are welcome, San Fran there. We're getting someone on command. Dylan, he is happy that he is gone. Kieran, happy. Glasgow Harley Rider, happy. Roberno is happy. Benidorm Celtic saying no. They're on X saying no. It's very much to do with the board. And yet, look, I totally agree. They are the fundamental issue here. But we also need to look at the results factor. Brown Warrior, he's happy. I'm dead surprised that you're happy with that, but there you go. And yes, I think we do need to know the facts as to why he left. I think it's very much a yes all round. I'm not seeing very much, not seeing a lot there. You know, my wee ma, she's saying yes. We knew that as well, and we did need a change. I think that's the problem. As much as if we had Brendan Rodgers and he got more players, could we have done better? I fully believe we wouldn't be in this position had we strengthened in the summer. But it's the balancing act, as I say. It's about playing the odds. Would we have got to the next transfer window without falling further behind, or certainly dropping points, or staying where we are? In my heart, I don't think so. So that was the real conundrum that had to be answered one way or another. But yeah, as you say, everybody, and I agree with this, you know, they're saying, glad he's gone, but not in the circumstances. Yep. You don't want it to be around about negativity and button heads. The board are an issue. The collective, the fans, that will continue. We'll continue to ask for meaningful change at board level. But you don't want the relationship between the board and the manager to be like that. That's unfortunate, because that's really, and you can always say, well, what do you mean? If things are going badly upstairs and upstairs, what do you expect? I do get that, but I just think that the circumstances weren't great. Manager shouting out in public at one thing, and rightfully so in many cases. Board maybe not supporting them, button heads, and it would become a sideshow. And no matter how much they tell you, it would eat its way into the dressing room, it would eat its way into the players' mindset, it would eat into the performances, and we have seen that. There's major work to be done here between now and January. But again, I say it, Martin O'Neill, vast experience, someone who will command respect, someone who will inspire, and someone that knows what it means. Do you know what? We might get a 3-5-2. We might actually play to the strengths of what we have at our disposal. And yes, Ian, no Lennon, no Ange. We cannot go back. We need to go forward. And especially when it looks as if Kennedy and maybe Strachan are out the building, it could well be the clean slate and the recalibration that we've been asking for an absolute long time. So listen, thank you very much to every single one of you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I wouldn't expect anything less, to be totally honest with you, with all this going on. Myself and Paddy will be back at some point through the course of the week. We've also got that game, the big game now, against Falkirk on Wednesday. It's going to be the first time out for Martin O'Neill. It's going to be the first time out for Sean Maloney. And actually, it's going to be very interesting, because tomorrow, well, I expect to hear from both of them and doing a pre-match on it. And, let's see how it goes. It can't get any worse, can it? And yes, I'm happy that it's those two guys that are in terms of, plugging a gushing hole. It's a lot better than bringing back Darna Day or Jazzy McGrew, step him up. So take it as you find it. But listen, thanks for joining us. If you haven't done already, hit the subscribe button, give a wee thumbs up, share out our content, get more bodies into the Celtic World Order family here. So until the next time, take care of yourselves. Let's see how this one pans out, and hail.